Hi there, I'm Frederick Van Johnson. We're here with another really exciting interview for you. This time I've got some Sony representatives. I got two guys here, one from the consumer team, one from the pro team, as you could probably tell from the gear that they're holding on their laps, which is which. You got Mark Weir from the consumer team. Mark, welcome.
Glad to be here.
What's your official title on the consumer team?
I'm the Senior Technology Manager for Digital Imaging.
And that means you just know everything about every product in there, all the nuances down to the micrometer level?
People have said that, but I'm not entirely sure.
And humility as well.
Yeah.
And Peter Crithery, welcome.
Thank you.
So you are pro team, obviously. What's your position over there?
I'm marketing manager in charge of our Cine Ultra line of products, which is the higher-end motion picture cameras.
Okay.
Everything from the FS100, 700, the F5, 55, F65. So our 4K motion picture cameras.
So as we were talking about off camera, those are the cameras that professional photographers, still photographers and advanced amateurs kind of look at, and I'm talking about myself here, so I look at that.
Look at one of these.
I look at that and I'm intimidated. I'm like, okay, that's the real deal there. So is there, from a photographer standpoint, from someone moving from, say, an A7 series and looking at going into filmmaking proper, what is this the proper camera for them to step into, or should they be stepping into something a little bit more pedestrian?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of commonalities in how you take stills photography and how you work with motion picture. Exposure, latitude, dynamic range, color balancing, lighting, and so forth. A lot of those attributes can be applied to motion picture. So very quickly they can migrate from stills to video and pick up the camera, expose, look at the light metering, look at the monitoring, hit the record button, and away they go. So it's not as difficult as what people think.
So the learning curve is not as steep as we think. Right?
To get going, yes.
To get going.
And then as you progress through the journey, you'll learn more on how to shoot, to compose for motion picture.
Right.
And as I said, a lot of those traits are common from stills, composition and so forth, and correct lighting, depth of field. And so forth.
Yeah. So just it's light, right? It's image making, depth of field, exposure, composition, all that stuff.
Right.
So when you look at this, is it when photographers are saying, okay, I'm going to move into that, and they want to get up to speed quickly. Say they have a project, they want to get up to speed quickly. How do they do that? If I decide, okay, enough of this model photography stuff. I want to make my first feature film, and I'm going to get one of these cameras or rent one or whatever. What's my next step? Do I just get it and start going through the manual? Are there resources on the Sony site to help me?
There are a number of resources available. First of all, you have a very active and very passionate community online that are always sharing their knowledge and their ideas, and they're always having conversations with each other through our own Sony Community Support Forum, which we support and we respond to directly. Then we have our in-house training, our Digital Motion Picture Center, for example, in LA, where people can come and learn and take classes on how to work with the technology to perfect their craft. And we also have support engineers and quite a large staff that will visit you on location to your facility and train you as well. So there are a number of different routes that you can take. There's training videos online. The web is a fantastic resource for learning, as we know, and that's equally applicable to the professional side as well. Yeah. So
we have some of these cameras kind of cycling through behind us, including we have one live here on set here, and we're shooting this with one of them. As I'm looking at the line, I'm wondering, okay, which is which? Which one is for me? What are the differences? On still camera, I know megapixels, sensor size, all that stuff. Right. What are the points of differentiation between these guys?
Right, that's a good question. So as we're cycling through there, you can see some of the smaller handheld cameras, and we get up into the bigger cameras like these guys. The primary differences are how the cameras see the reality, how much light they can handle, low light, how they perform, resolution, clarity of the image, the quality of the files that are being recorded. Sure. The different feature sets in the cameras start to become a lot more powerful as you go up the range of the cameras. Sure. But having said that, Sony we have remarkable engineers, and Mark can talk to this as well. We have a lot of secret sauce in our technology that the competitors don't have. So even with the smaller cameras, you're getting a remarkable image. Yep. And as I mentioned, as you progress up through the scale of the cameras, the image becomes that much more powerful. But the flexibility of what you can do with the cameras also expands dramatically as well. So I know we won't get technical, but we can do simultaneous recording to do different card formats in the camera. We have exposure tools. We have many other features that dramatically expand the tool set of what you can do with the cameras.
Amazing.
And so that's how it changes as you go up the line.
Now, Mark, during the press conference a couple days ago when the A7S was announced and everyone went, ooh, especially with the 4K footage that we were seeing, where, from your standpoint, as a still photographer, I'm looking at, okay, now it's time for me to jump into 4K. This camera, is it the ideal camera for me to jump into 4K in the Sony line?
Well, it really depends upon the style of photography and videography you're looking to do, and the type of project that you're working on, and whether or not the attributes of the camera really appeal to what you're doing and fit into your workflow. What we're doing here with the A7 is packing a full-frame image sensor into a very, very small and compact body. So it appeals to still photographers, and then in the context of the A7S, we're also adding some unique technology and feature sets to appeal to videography as well. But the overall idea of the Alpha 7S is to realize very, very wide dynamic range and very, very high sensitivity with low noise by taking advantage of a very large image sensor and using a moderate number of megapixels to realize very, very large photo sites, and also to have some really, really high saturation levels that it's capable of handling. So by being able to capture an extraordinary range of shadow to highlight and also very high sensitivity and low noise, you can work in low light in circumstances that very few, if any, cameras would be able to manage it. But at the same time, we maintain the small size and weight so that it appeals not only to videographers but also still photographers, because you can take the camera into areas that you might not be able to take a larger camera. And then we put in the advantage of reading all of the pixels directly for both Full HD and 4K, and avoiding the aliasing and artifacts that's common to pretty much any DSLR that's trying to shoot video.
That's a point. I wanted to pause you on that because I saw that in the spec sheet, the direct pixel readout, and I'm still trying to get my brain around what that means. And I was looking forward to this talk so I could ask you that, so thank you for bringing that up. So go into a little bit more detail about what that means and how it's different in this camera versus another competing, say, mirrorless DSLR.
Well, if we look at the how digital SLRs became video acquisition tools, if you will. 3-4 years ago, this started to happen because it was very difficult to get large sensor, or very costly, shall we say, to get large sensor video acquisition devices. I mean, cameras like f55, of course, have very large image sensors, but not within the reach of some filmmakers or independents who are just trying to step into videography. So the point is that digital SLRs became the rage simply because they offered interchangeable lenses and large image sensors. And anyone familiar with the history knows how it happened from there. But the challenge for using a digital SLR for filmmaking is that it's really the wrong image sensor. In video we think of 4K or 5K sensors. Megapixels really aren't used as a descriptor in filmmaking as they are in digital SLRs. Typically a digital SLR will have 24 megapixels. And if you're capturing a 2 megapixel frame, which is HD, you can't capture all of those pixels and use them for the file because you can't downsample rapidly enough. So pretty much any digital SLR is going to read only one row of pixels for every several rows of pixels on the image sensor. And that leads to aliasing and artifacts and moire, particularly, that filmmakers just aren't willing to tolerate. So that's a big problem, because a digital SLR doesn't have the freedom to have the right pixel count, if you will, for video. There are very few people who will buy a 4 megapixel or an 8 megapixel digital SLR because they won't recognize what the pixel count should be. So what we've done here is we have taken the freedom of having several models in our Alpha 7 line to create a full frame interchangeable lens camera with just 12 megapixels. And for Full HD, that means we can read every pixel because we have a direct pixel readout technology that is shared by pretty much no other camera in the world. And then in 4K, we can capture the full width of the full frame image sensor in 16:9 for 8.3 megapixels. So essentially the sensor offers the right number of megapixels. For 4K, we can read every single one of them without any line skipping, without any pixel binning, and therefore it's essentially artifact free.
Now, how do you guys compete with, or how do you address the the uninformed perception? Because clearly you're informed at 12 megapixels and what you're going to get out of that with a direct pixel readout. But the average consumer is they're still in that megapixel mindset. They're going to say 12 megapixels. Why only 12 megapixels? It must not be as good as this other camera with more megapixels.
Well, certainly education will be part of the plan. But again, we have the flexibility with the Alpha 7 series for those who can't get their minds off of megapixels, or for those who appropriately need higher resolutions for the work that they're doing. Yep. We offer other models. The Alpha 7R, for instance, a 36 megapixel sensor for extraordinary resolution and detail rendering. So, but again, would it be the appropriate tool for videography? I think we can see that it's really not the best tool for that. Yeah. And again, the other advantage is that we're trying to extend through the limits that are currently challenging digital image capture for both still and video of dynamic range. Dynamic range is a challenge for existing technologies, right, simply because the image sensors, the material science necessary to capture the range of shadow to highlight of, say, what human vision can do, it's still tough. Yeah. And what we want to do with this camera, well, more specifically the image sensor in this camera, is start to break through some of those limitations.
I love it. We were talking the other day about 4K, I think it was at dinner, and the whole idea that the holy grail for a lot of still photographers is to shoot video in 4K and then harvest the footage, extract frames from it, and use that, thereby eliminating, flashes and all this stuff. I'm just going to shoot motion and pull a still frame from that. That's kind of been the holy grail for a lot of people for a while. Are we there now with cameras like the A7S?
Well, particularly in the context of being able to read the full width of the full frame sensor, I would say we are. I mean, there's really only two cameras that can shoot 4K on a full frame image sensor, and this is one of them. And the ability to read out all of the pixels from the full width of the sensor so that you have the correct field of view, the correct focal length for your lenses, no crop factor, no focal length multiplier, the advantage of controlling plane of focus that you get from a very large image sensor. I would say that this is certainly a very big step in that direction.
That's right.
And the idea of being able to capture 24 or 30 8.3 megapixel images per second certainly puts photographers in an excellent position to capture exactly the right moment.
Yeah.
Plus, there's all kinds of things you can do with a workflow as well of that. It's a tremendous asset.
So speaking of just the overall, sort of family of products. So looking at it from the standpoint of a filmmaker, right? So a filmmaker is on set. Would an A7S and this guy here feel at home? Is a filmmaker going to be able to use these tools together, and maybe even introduce in the action cam? Can they do all that stuff, bring it all in together? Would that be a scenario for a filmmaker?
Well, again, this is not a purpose-built cinema creation camera. Sure. There are certainly many demands that you need for motion picture creation. That obviously the F-55 is extraordinarily.
You mean this can't do everything there?
No, it certainly cannot.
There are a lot of scenarios in production where, on the professional side, they'll take a camera like this and they'll take a camera like that, and they'll mount what Mark said earlier. You can mount these in areas where you can't mount these, for example. So this becomes your primary camera for shooting the main action sequences, for example. And then this camera can be, say, for example, mounted on a motorbike or in a car or in a very tight space. Shoot in 4K with this, and then you can intercut with the 4K from this, and that's quite a common scenario.
Right.
The cameras
not to mention expense. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very common scenario to work with these two types of technologies to have a very pleasing combined result.
And one of the things that we've done, and you mentioned Action Cam, for instance, so to put across a broad spectrum of capture devices, we've been able to incorporate the XAVC codec. And by incorporating, obviously in an F-55, we have XAVC Intra. In the consumer models, we use the XAVC S long op. But by putting in a codec that is of the same family, the ability to take footage from all of the devices and work with it in post is significantly enhanced. I mean, it's not like you need to shoot, say, MP4 or a low data rate codec in your smaller cameras. You now have the freedom of using XAVC, and even in our action cam, we can shoot 50 megabit per second full HD. In this camera, we can shoot 50 megabit per second HD as well as 60 megabit per second 4K. So that type of flexibility allows you some tremendous advantages as well.
So Mark, speaking specifically about the A7 line, there's 3 in the family now. The A7, A7R now, this A7S.
Yes.
So we've got 3 in there. They look almost identical to the naked eye. When a photographer is, say, in a camera store or online looking at these cameras, how do they make the decision on which one they should buy?
Well, it's a great question, and I really think it has to do with not only the projects they're doing, the workflow that they're doing, but also their objectives. For those photographers who are shooting images that would require very high resolution, very high output sizes, for instance, who are working in very well-controlled circumstances. Obviously, the A7R is a wonderful tool because it really pushes the limits of still image resolution that's available today. I mean, you're really operating almost at a medium format level in a camera that can literally fit in the jacket pocket. If you're a photographer who isn't working that way and will value the advantages of the sensitivity, the low noise, the tremendous dynamic range, if those are the scenes that you're capturing, certainly A7S has enormous appeal. If you're a photographer who is crossing over and doing work in video and still and needs that sort of flexibility, there's some advantages to an Alpha 7S that are not shared by the 7 and the 7R, particularly around the inclusion of the XAVC codec. Obviously 4K will appeal to many people. The direct pixel readout will deliver cleaner video than certainly the other models, simply because of the advantage in the sensor. So it really is more of a usage model that will cause people to select, at least we hope it will. Many will gravitate to the newest model in the line.
Or the most expensive, right?
Right, or the most expensive.
Right.
But we would suggest rather to make the determination based on your workflow and your expectations.
Love it. Peter, I'll give you the same question. When new filmmakers or even existing filmmakers are looking at the lineup, the Sony lineup of pro cameras, what's a good tip from you on how to choose the right one?
Well, there's budgetary concerns for a given production, obviously. The lower cost cameras don't offer as many features as the higher cost cameras. But very, very common with what Mark was saying, dynamic range, the quality of the picture, the type of codec that you want to record to. A very big advantage as you get up to the higher end cameras is RAW. You can record RAW directly from the image sensor to the cards. And what RAW gives you, which the compressed codecs won't give you, is the entire performance characteristics of the image sensor without compression. So RAW gives a significantly amount more flexibility in how the image is captured and how you can treat that image in post-production. So typically the higher end cameras with productions that are shooting, for example, feature films, will want to shoot RAW because they can manipulate the dynamic range, the colorimetry, the gamut and so forth with a lot more flexibility than what the codecs will do. So that becomes a very sharp differentiation between the lower end cameras and the higher end cameras. And the other choices are what Mark was mentioning, XAVC, which is Sony's development of the AVC codec. It is not AVC HD. It is a much more sophisticated, much higher quality compression technology that becomes available with the higher end cameras as well, with higher frame rates. So if you want to shoot spectacular slow motion imagery, for example, the higher end cameras will do up to 180 frames per second internally to the recording format in the camera, and then with RAW we can do up to 240 frames per second in 2K RAW. So then you start to see some very big differences between what the cameras are capable of capturing and how they're able to capture from the lower end cameras. So to nutshell it, really, you have to quantify, you have to qualify the production that you're going to shoot. What is it that you want to get out of it? And then you start to look at the cameras and where they sit. in terms of capability and, of course, price and performance.
So price and performance, what's the range, the price range for you?
Well, I mean, you can come in with an FS100 camera, for example, which is not 4K, but it's HD, but superb picture quality. You can come in $3,000, $4,000, and on the professional side, and then you migrate up steadily from there up to the $28,000 F55. So we have the FS700, which is a 4K image sensor capable camera, which shoots beautiful pictures, has high frame rate, doesn't do RAW, but it does compressed codecs internally. That's around $8,000. Yeah. And then after that, you go to the F5 camera, which is the junior to the 55, which is around $16,000. And then, as I mentioned, the 55, which is $28,000.
Now, this camera here, this is a feature film type camera that I'm going to see Lord of the Rings, Spider-Man, that kind of thing?
At that level, sure. That level, and also television, episodic television shows, series are all shot with these types of cameras, documentaries, wildlife. Wow. The advantage of the larger image sensor and the 4K resolution gives that shallow depth of field a very pleasing look to the image. Yeah. So it's not only about high-end productions, the diversity of where these cameras are being used is actually across the board. Corporate, fashion, sports, documentaries and so forth, television, films, pretty much everywhere where they want to capture a spectacular image is where these cameras are being used.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Mark, price range on just start with there's a litany of products that are flying back behind us, but this guy right here, what's the price range for these?
Well, that's what everybody wants to know. But we haven't announced the pricing and timing for the Alpha 7S, but the Alpha 7's in the market at $1,700. The Alpha 7R is introduced in the market at $2,300. So everyone has an expectation of what the Alpha 7S will cost, but we haven't revealed it yet.
Guess. Yeah. But no delivery date yet either.
Well, that hasn't been released yet.
Everyone wants to know.
But it'll be soon enough.
Very cool. Very cool. We can't wait. Mark, where would you like people to go to find out more about Sony's consumer products, this camera, Action Cam, all those guys?
Well, SonyDigitalImaging.com is a great resource for all things Sony and digital imaging in the consumer space. Just about anything you'd want to find out can be found out there.
Excellent. Peter, what about these guys?
For the cameras specifically, Sony.com/35mm, and all the camera range is there, very detailed specifications, user stories, and it's one resource. It's very information packed, and that's a very good place to start.
Very cool. Mark, thank you for coming on. Peter?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
on.
Excellent. My head's about to explode. I'm Frederick Van Johnson. That's it for this interview. We'll see you in the next one.